G'day humans, welcome to the safe space for dangerous ideas. Is she or isn't she gay or straight or bi, in or out of the closet? These are some of the most dangerous questions that can plague a young person, especially when they're skyrocketed to fame as a result of their creative genius, as was today's guest, Missy Higgins. It's hard to overstate for non-Australians how important Missy Higgins is in the Australian music pantheon. She exploded to superstardom down under when she was still in her late teens. Her first single shot to #1.
And doesn't it feel peculiar when everyone wants a little more? So that I do remember to never go that far. Could you leave me with the sky?
Her first album went straight to #1 at the ARIA Awards, which are Australia's Grammys. She won Best Pop Album.
And we could only see each other, we'll breathe together. These arms will not be taught to need another's, 'cause we're this special too.
She was a phenomenon, and at the time, she was secretly dating her tour manager, who happened to be a female. The tabloids went crazy, speculation swirled, and now she finds herself with a couple of kids and an ex-husband and an incredible life story. She has a brand new album, which is a must listen, and I just found it fascinating to explore fame, success, failure, love, the closet, and everything else with the one and only Missy Higgins. You doing all of these things?
I hosted Rage this morning and flew from Melbourne, but I haven't done any other podcast today.
Rage, explain what Rage is to non-Australian listeners.
Rage is a music video TV show that it's like curated music video playlists.
Yeah, it's like sort of like MTV used to be in the States, I guess, right? It's like,
yeah, I guess so. And you have specific hosts come on
Yeah.
and choose like 50 songs and choose about, 15 to introduce and talk about.
and it's iconic. I mean, it's a cultural icon of a show, but
is.
it's amazing to me that it still exists.
I know, because it goes all night too.
Does it?
It's for like people that are on drugs at 3 a.m. chewing their mouths off.
So you got up this morning in Melbourne,
I
shot
did.
Rage. Is that live?
No, I flew here and then shot Rage
Okay.
and then came here. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just interested because when people are on like press tours and constantly talking to interviewers, I just feel so much empathy for you because like so much of the conversation is so fatuous.
Yeah. Well, especially radio.
Especially radio.
Radio is so stupid.
And honestly-
they make you do these games like,
Yeah, I know.
what did you have for breakfast kind of things.
And there's Biffo, Boffo, and Sheila.
all
And they're all like,
Watto.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We'll spin the wheel. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, I know.
I'm not sure why it's still like that. It's like they're catering to a really dumb audience or something.
It's very broad, isn't it?
Yeah.
On commercial radio.
Yeah.
And people are flicking around.
Not
Well,
like
actually-
this show.
Well, not like
Very
this show.
highbrow.
No. No, but I just mean also, even on like podcasts and long form stuff, no offense to your profession, but I do find the way that interviewers interview musicians to be particularly tedious. There's just something a bit
There's definitely a set
irritating
of
about-
questions
There's
that we
set
get
of
asked a
questions
lot.
and like it brings out the most pretentious side of interviewers, I find, talking to musicians, because like, they're all like, and so like I think the real power of your lyrics, Missy, comes from like just the ability to connect, and like that deep sense of humanity, that you have and that you share with everybody. And like, what are you supposed to do with that? Well, yeah, I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
Thanks. Like,
Yeah. Well, the most common question is what comes first, the lyrics or the
Right.
music? And I have
does
to
come
pretend
first, the
not
lyrics
to
or the
roll my
music?
eyes into the back of my head every time I'm asked that.
What are some other ones where you get inspiration from?
Where do you get inspiration
Yeah.
from is a huge one.
Like only a person who has no creativity can ask, where do you get inspiration from?
Yeah.
Like as if, like they're completely baffled by the concept of having a muse, of having like something that comes out when you just give it time and space to come out.
I think that they're probably looking for a quote like the John Lennon one about walking along the street and plucking it out of the air. And
What is that quote?
I don't know, something about walking along the street and plucking
Lennon.
it out of the
It
air.
was probably a great quote.
Yeah,
Sure.
that was very poignant.
My favourite John Lennon quote is that life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
I like that too.
It's so inspired.
Yeah.
So true. Mm-hmm. Especially once you have kids and start,
Yeah.
think like,
Yeah, I think I've been learning that lately more than ever, actually. I think something about turning 40 and going through a divorce at the same time made me realise that I have absolutely no idea what the future holds, because I had such a strong story that I'd written out for myself, like, this is the way my life's going to go. Yeah. I'm going to tick all these boxes that make me a successful human, and then I'm going to win the game of life.
That's right.
Yeah, it didn't
He
happen.
who dies with the most toys wins.
Yeah,
as
exactly.
my mum's T-shirt used to say.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Was there anything liberating about that?
Yeah, definitely. It was one of those feelings, I guess when something really extreme like that happens, it kind of, there's this kind of terrifying feeling, while simultaneously there's a bit of an exhilarating feeling, because suddenly you get a chance to reinvent yourself, and suddenly, you know, the future is unknown. And I don't know, we just don't get many chances for that. And I realised that part of me had been looking to the future going, fuck, I know exactly how it's going to go. I'm going to die with this person, and I'm never going to have any other, you know, romantic experiences ever again.
And did that flash up as a negative valence?
And yeah, I mean, I feel like everyone that's married is pretending, if they don't occasionally think to themselves, shit, is this okay? Yep, this is it forever. You know, you've got to at least fantasize about the idea of being single once in a while.
I don't know if that's true in my case. I kind of hope that maybe there's like some little element of, yes, there's going to be a certain level of sameness, but also like I've hitched my wagon to this train or whatever, and like so we're going to have a whole bunch of different experiences together.
Well, that's good. You probably met the right person then.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Yeah, and I imagine there's a sense of comfort and security in that too.
Yeah.
Knowing like you've made your choice and now you don't have to keep considering other people. You know, I mean, being single is pretty exhausting.
I mean, we're all going to die. Like that's the thing that I sort of realized in my 40s. You know, it's like, wow, it's just all that's going to happen is we're just going to keep on being busy, and then at some point we're not going to be able to be busy anymore.
Yeah. I think I realised too that there is this kind of cultural obsession with longevity at all costs.
I'm part of that.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, and I've bought into it as well.
Yeah.
You know, when I was, you know, growing up, everybody reads the happily ever after stories, and you think, okay, well, obviously all these stories end with, you know, obviously it's usually a man and a woman meeting up and falling in love and being together forever. And I read these stories to my kids and I'm like, I feel like I have to do a caveat that, well, you know, you don't have to get married, and you don't actually have to meet anyone in order to be fulfilled and happy.
Don't have to live forever either.
Yeah. But I think that had been so ingrained in me, and now I'm trying to undo that, because I feel like in order to be a fully, you know, spiritually developed person, I should probably become very comfortable with the idea of finding happiness internally.
Of course. And, I mean, we all know that, don't we?
It's like, I know. But there is something innately human about wanting a partner, I think.
Yeah.
It's about kind of trying to unpick that
narrative. Did you always want one?
Yeah. I didn't always want kids, and I didn't always want to get married. I think once my sister had a baby and my ovaries just started screaming at me, then I was marriage, babies.
Right.
And I
Do you think marriage was an instrumental thing that you were doing to have babies?
I think I liked the idea of marriage because I found the idea of having a wedding really romantic. Like just having a huge party where you're declaring your love in front of everybody. Yeah. And also, I think I like the idea that we're locking this in with each other, and we're basically making it really, really hard to leave each other. Yeah. And that made me feel more secure.
When you put it like that, it doesn't sound very appealing, actually.
Yeah.
It sounds more prison-like in that phrasing.
Yeah. But I feel like, you know, there must be something inside us that knows that, you know, if you don't have things really set in stone, or if you don't make those promises in front of hundreds of people, then you may be more inclined to stray.
But I think I would have been fine without that. I don't
really.
I was never a long-term relationship guy until I just met someone who I really, really enjoyed being around, and then I was like, oh, maybe this would work actually if we did that. So,
I like the idea of just choosing the same person every day, like the idea that every day is a choice to be with that person.
That's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing about having kids is that you don't get to re-choose the kids every day. You have to. So you have to choose to re-choose your own children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to choose to re-choose your own family,
Yeah.
essentially.
And you have to accept that. I remember Steve Biddulph said somewhere that you don't get the kids that you imagined you'd get, and the kids don't get the parents that they imagined that they'd
That's
get,
right.
that they always
Yes.
dreamed they'd get, which is so true.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the biggest life lessons come from. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, this is, if I could have, if I could have hand-drawn the perfect child, it would have been one that didn't have tantrums, was
of
always
course.
super grateful, who loved my music, who just sit on the floor, just listening to me,
I mean, look, in my case, my children do have the perfect father in me, but I don't have the perfect children, unfortunately. So
Yeah,
they've got
right.
the raw end of that deal.
That's a shame.
It's funny to me that success in your mind was associated with like settling down and being and happily ever after and like the white picket fence, because that doesn't strike me as something that's been core to your either life or public image. And because you were so successful so early. I mean, that's...
Yeah. I think because I grew up with a family, we really prided ourselves on being this really strong family unit. And it was all about how mum and dad were still married after all these years. And, when all our friends' parents got divorced, it was like we were the family that were sticking together. There was a lot of focus on that growing up, and we always had family dinners, and rarely was anyone else invited, and it was just all about, I don't know, keeping that family unit really strong and really precious. And so I just wanted that for my kids, and my kids, like they're not going to grow up with that, and the guilt of that and the shame that I feel about that is something that I have really had to tackle the last couple of years, because it feels like I feel like I really let them down in that regard. So now I feel like I've got to be super mum in every respect to kind of make up for the fact that they now live in a single parent household. So I'm not sure how much of that is like cultural conditioning and they're actually completely fine, or I don't know how much it is actually really beneficial for them to have two parents. But it feels like a lot of the time it feels like I'm not enough for them.
Well, what's definitely not beneficial is for them to have a single parent who's constantly beating herself up about the fact that her marriage didn't work.
Well, that's why I'm writing songs about it, in order to move through all of that shame. And
why shame? You've used that word twice.
Yeah, I don't know. It just came up a lot when I was writing these songs. Like it came up that I wasn't. It was almost like I failed at the one thing that I wanted to give my kids. And again, I think that cultural conditioning of like, this is what it means to have a successful adult life, is you have,
Right.
the 2.5 kids, picket fence, marriage that lasts forever.
I mean, it's also a thing that's very hard, and that half of the people who do it don't continue with it.
Yeah, I just didn't want to be
in that
half.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, though,
Yeah.
that would land for you as shame, because it could land as any number of things. It could land as betrayal. It could land as, having made a bad mistake. It could land as you blaming him.
Yeah, I think that's my downfall, is that I never blame anyone but myself. But also he didn't, not to go into the details of our relationship, but nothing bad happened. You know what I mean? It just kind of didn't work. It just disintegrated.
Yeah.
So I think, I feel like maybe women in particular take on a lot of the burden of like keeping the family together and making sure that the husband's happy and making sure that everyone's okay all the time. So I feel like I've taken it on a little bit, although he feels terrible and shameful as well. So I don't know. We're all a big mess.
I think the kids are going to be okay. Of all the situations and scenarios that children can find themselves in, I think having a single parent is not one of the worst. I mean, I am interested in that initial period of fame when you were young, though. I mean, because I was talking to Keith Urban the other day, who was talking about how relentless the slog and the grind was for him, for like years turning into decades, and not really feeling like he was getting a huge amount of traction, and just how long he had to bash his head against the brick wall of Nashville before getting anywhere. And for you, like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were a teenager.
Yeah.
You wrote a song.
Didn't bash my head for very long.
You signed with Warner
Yeah.
Music. Your first album was like #1 in Australia and won a bunch of ARIAs, which are our Grammy Awards. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty crazy, and I don't think I handled it very well. I mean, I'd always been a pretty, although I'd loved performing, I was always a pretty introverted kid. So when I got famous very fast, I really struggled emotionally with that. And then I went over to America where I wasn't famous, and I toured there for many, many years, which I loved at first, but then I did it for too long and I burnt myself out. But I think I always felt like I wished I'd done the hard yards in a way.
I was
like
wondering about that.
Yeah.
Do you think that there would have been some kind of character building or creative, upside to...
I think I probably would have been a bit more grateful for the fame. I think at the beginning it was so hard because I was like, I didn't ask for this, I was a little bit like, why did this happen to me? Woe is me kind of thing. I mean, I was young, and I mean, a lot of young people don't handle fame very well. But I think I know a lot of people who had done the hard yards for so long and then they got success and they just embraced it, and they embraced the fame with both hands, and they loved every second of it. But I was just like, oh, I just wanted to sing. I just got out of high school. What's happening? And I'd wear, big dark glasses like I was Paris Hilton, and have a big beanie over my head. But then I took a huge amount of time off in my 20s. I actually quit music for a while because I'd started hating it. And then when I found my way back to it, I had developed a lot of gratitude, and that stayed. So I'm really grateful that I went away from it for a long time and made my way back.
And you were also very much in the public eye at a time when you're dealing with a whole bunch of stuff in your personal life, I'm sure, which you didn't necessarily want to be in the public eye. You were dating a girl at the time, and everyone was constantly asking about your sexuality and who you're in a relationship with.
Yeah.
What do you look back on? I mean, how do you think about that and the process of coming out in hindsight?
I think that also made it harder too. I think because every interview I was doing, the interviewer was trying to get me to say the pronoun of the person that I wrote a specific song about. And so it felt like this game of dodgeball every time I was in an interview, because I was like, how do I explain this song without saying he or she, And it was really, really stressful, and it just felt like nobody's business. And her and I were still trying to figure out whether we wanted to go public or not, because it was like our first proper relationship with a woman. And I think that made it all a lot harder to handle, all the scrutiny. But then,
how did you... Sorry, finish the thought.
No, you...
Well,
you
I was just going to say, and how did you feel about the concept of being out, and the concept of there being a responsibility? Sometimes people can feel like there's almost a moral onus on them to you got to be out and proud, and you got to be like a card-carrying, flag-waving member of the capital C community, and you're like, I'm just living my life.
Yeah.
Dude.
I think because it was so new. I mean, I remember having a conversation with her where I was like, I wanted to tell the world, because I was really in love. We'd been together for a year, and I was completely comfortable with it. We'd told our family and our friends, and she wasn't yet comfortable to tell everybody because we were in a working capacity with each other. And she's like, I don't want
this was your
tour
management.
Yeah,
tour manager at the time.
She was like, I don't want your management, your record company to treat me differently, or to think this is some kind of, that I should be treated as your girlfriend instead of your tour manager.
Yeah.
And I ended up writing a song about that called Secret, because we were just in this little secret bubble together. But it was also a bit of a different time. I remember thinking that my American label in particular would not have been happy about it. I mean, they were trying to really girly me up in all my video clips. They wanted me to, I was really pushing back about not wearing dresses in all my video clips, and then wanting me to grow my hair, and they didn't like the short hair tomboy look. And there was just an undertone of homophobia. So it didn't feel 100% good for my career at the time, which is funny to look back on now, because obviously so much has changed. It's
it'd be great.
It's almost like, how do we get this into the bio to get me more fans now?
Yeah.
But it was a bit of a different time.
And now how do you feel about activism and the community and so on? I mean, I only ask because I'm sort of personally torn a bit about this. I mean, I'm married to a guy, but I had long and fruitful relationships with girls when I was younger, and I sort of feel like you could play the story of my life again and it could go differently, and I could have made different decisions, and I could be in a relationship with a girl, and I suspect that probably has been more common throughout history and in various places than we sometimes think it has. And yet we're still very combative about there being labels and identities and in and out of closets and things in a way that I wonder whether there will ever come a point at which that becomes actually counterproductive, and that turning the volume down instead of up.
The labels are becoming so vast and broad that I wonder if at one point that it's just going to become one big thing where we all go, it's just...
Wouldn't that be relaxing?
Easy breezy,
wouldn't it be
fluid,
easier?
man? Fluid,
yeah. Baby. Yeah.
I remember that's what I felt was if I was to define myself back then, I didn't want to define myself as bisexual because it felt like too small a label.
Yeah.
So I said if I could define myself as anything, it would be fluid, which is a strange word.
No, I love it. I'm only laughing because unless people have actually thought about this, it's very hard for it to land because it just sounds like you're being pretentious. I remember having a conversation with one of my close friends and like talking for 20 or 30 minutes and spilling my heart out about all my thoughts and feelings about sexuality and labels and gender and fluidity and everything. And at the end he was like, so there's gay, straight and bi. Which one are you? And I was like,
did you hear anything I just said?
What an awful prison of a world to live in where you've just got a bureaucratic checkbox that you have to tick.
Yeah. It feels very, very, very box ticky. And I think because it feels like such a state of flux that I'm always in with my sexuality too. Like I go through stages where I'm like, I'm only looking at girls, and then some stages where I'm like, no, I'm definitely interested in dudes at the moment. Like there's just something about the masculine and the feminine. I don't know if it's hormonal for me, but I just want to be able to choose month by month, year by year, what I feel is my identity, and any label that I put on myself is going to get me stuck in that forever, especially if I say it publicly.
So one of the cliches about quote unquote bisexuals is that they can never settle down because they're never going to be satisfied with one sex or the other. Did it contribute to the breakdown of your marriage?
No, that didn't. No. But going forward, I'm like, do I want to be I like the idea of an open relationship going forward. We never talked about this when I was married, but I'm like, I like the idea of, maybe it's because I did have that mentality for 9 years of this is the only person I'm going to be with forever. And I was fine with that because, again, that's that commitment that I wanted to make, and I felt like a successful human being for making that commitment. Yeah. But something about having broken up now and moving into the second act of my life, into my 40s, I'm like, maybe I don't believe in monogamy, and maybe I don't want to just choose one gender for the rest of my life or one person. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I feel like maybe everyone says that until they fall in love and then they don't want their partner to be with anyone else.
Well, not wanting your partner to be with anyone else is one thing, but whether or not that trumps your desire to be with other people is the question, isn't it? I mean, nobody likes the idea of their partner being with other. Well, some people do. Some people do. That's not true.
What's it called? Compersion?
Yeah,
that's liking the idea. That's getting joy out of the idea of your partner getting joy with somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be a real turn on for some people
or something, right? I mean, like some people also get a kick out of the idea of being betrayed as well. Like,
well,
not that it's all betrayal.
It's not betrayal because it's very much consensual. Yeah.
But there are people who also get a kick out of being betrayed.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's all
I don't
sorts.
I don't like being betrayed, but I like the idea of my partner being with someone else.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. But I mean, I guess my point is that even if one didn't, then it still might be a price worth paying in order to have the freedom to explore yourself, you know? And also, I mean, the funny thing about monogamy is we sort of treat it like it's an on-off switch, like you're going to have an open relationship where you can both go out every night and just end up in all the glory holes of Sydney, you know, like, and then come home and like, you know, there's nothing special about the sexual relationship that you have with your partner because you're spreading yourself all over the place. But at the other end of the spectrum, there's also just a difference in emphasis where, like, monogamy is not the sole defining, deal-breaking, like, arbiter of whether or not the relationship is a success, which is what seems to be the expectation. It's like almost everything else can be forgiven, except it's like this one thing has to be so fundamental.
Yeah, that seems crazy to me.
Yeah.
And also I think the idea of your relationship or your sexual relationship with your partner not being special because you're putting it in all the glory holes. Yeah. I just don't think that's true. I think that it could make it more special.
Right at home.
Yeah, the number one glory
the number
hole.
One glory hole.
In your bedroom. But I think that like a lot of the argument is that it does make it more special because you're it's creating an openness and a conversation that you wouldn't be able to have otherwise. And that whole thing of liking the idea that your partner's getting pleasure somewhere else, and it makes it a little bit more exciting because you do get a little bit jealous, and
That's
it makes
right.
it makes them seem more attractive to you because they're going off and being appealing to someone else.
And if part of the non-monogamy rules, which many non-monogamous people have, is that you can't see the same other person again, then what's special about your relationship is that this is the one person who you always come back to.
Exactly.
Right?
That's your love.
Yeah.
And I mean, people have several loves. They can have, polyamorous relationships. But I like the idea of having your one person and then you can go off and have weekend fun with other people.
Yeah. Polyamory doesn't appeal?
I don't think I could fall in love with several people. Like when I fall in love, I really fall in love with my whole heart. But I like the idea of being physical with other people. I think that would be fun because I think I could compartmentalize in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
I think that would just become a scheduling nightmare as well. And with kids, I just don't know how it would be
Google
physically possible.
calendars and like shared calendars. Yeah,
Too
I know.
many clashes.
It's interesting, isn't it? I wonder why we have this deep kind of norm about monogamy still. Do you think it's intrinsic or is it just a hangover from religion or something?
Yeah, I think it's just a hangover from wanting to own a woman.
Yeah, right.
And merge families.
I mean,
it seems a little bit archaic to me now.
It seems very archaic that there's so much emphasis on, and that you would detonate your life. I mean, that's what seems archaic to me, that you would blow up a family and derail everything because of one instance of I mean, it may not even have been infidelity. I mean, you may have a relationship where there's an acceptable boundary where a person, when the cat's away, or what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas or something like that. You might have a rule like that. So it may not be betrayal or infidelity per se. It may just be sleeping with another person with the implied consent of your partner or whatever. And the other weird thing, just while I'm on a rant about bisexuality, that the claim that it's harder for bisexuals to be monogamous is so weird to me because everyone...
I've just reinforced that, haven't I?
Well, no, because I asked you point blank and you denied it. But what's amazing to me is that everyone of every sexuality every day is declining to pursue opportunities to have sex with someone they want to. If they're in a monogamous relationship.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter whether
you're... Maybe going against human nature?
Maybe. And it's no more pronounced with a bisexual than it is with a straight person or a gay person. Like,
true. Yeah, you're just choosing one person.
Your partner is always not everything.
Yeah. And you've always got little gazy eyes, looking at everyone around you.
One would hope so.
I have both genders to gaze at.
Exactly. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, it was more fun.
More perving opportunity.
When are you more creative and when are you less creative? And does that wax and wane in relationship with any of this?
Is that another way of saying where do I get my inspiration from?
I suppose it is, isn't it? No, but I'm just sort of interested in like the periods in one's life when does love, obviously love stimulates, the creative.
Yeah, and God, heartbreak more than love in a way. I mean, I started writing this, I give a plug to my new album.
Please.
It's called The Second Act and it's all about this, and what made me start writing it was I started dating again. And before that, I hadn't written any songs for a year after my separation from my husband. And then I started dating someone and it just brought up all these feelings, and I realised that how messed up I still was and how much just guilt and shame and all that stuff that I was still holding on to, and just the complications of trying to have a relationship with someone who's not the parent of my child. Yeah. And how much, I don't know, it just felt like so much baggage that I was bringing to it, and I felt like, why would you want to be involved in this? Like I was miserable. I was crying in the pantry every night and feeling sorry for myself. And, you know, the evenings are so chaotic in my house. It's like one kid screaming at me from each end of the house and I'm running between the two and, you know, trying to be two parents. And I just think, how am I ever going to meet anyone who wants to be involved with this? But then I did. And it still didn't work because I couldn't stop looking at him and going, why would you want to be here? What's wrong with you?
That's deadly.
Yeah.
Like, give him the right to make bad decisions for himself.
I know, totally. I mean, I was just a mess, and that's what a lot of the songs are about. It's just like I'm just a little bit too damaged at the moment to get involved in. Maybe when the kids are a bit older.
You'll be less damaged?
I think so. I think I will have gotten over the separation, and I think my kids will be a little bit there might be a little bit more room because they're a bit older and a bit more mature, and I'm at the very hands-on stage.
How old?
I've got a 9-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl.
Yeah, it's a lot of it.
They're a lot. I mean, they're amazing, but I want to give them everything as well, you know? Like if I had a relationship, which I did try to do, I just felt myself being torn away a lot, my energy and my attention being torn away, and being in those new stages of a relationship. It's like you want to spend so much time with them, but I've got my kids 5 days a week at least. And
you can't do everything.
Yeah, I know.
You know, you don't have to do the beginning of the relationship perfectly and also the mothering perfectly, and therefore you can't do either because they're not perfect.
Yeah, I know. I just found it really hard to compartmentalize, I think. But again, I think most of all it was just because I still had so much that I was trying to deal with. Like, I think that's why I needed to write these songs. I went to a therapist and she ended up pretty much firing me because I couldn't get anything out. She was like, I just want you to have a little think about whether therapy is right for you or whether maybe songwriting is your therapy.
Right.
And I felt really offended. I was like, on the way home, I was like,
I
calling
do therapy
everyone
very
going,
well.
What does she mean? Doesn't she want my money? Jesus Christ. But I know what she means now. It's like I need my songs in order to be able to work through something. It's even more so than writing in a diary. If I can write a song about it, maybe because it's almost like writing a short little poem, but the music somehow intensifies the emotion and enables me to kind of navigate, you know, the resolution.
Yeah.
I find that it helps untangle whatever is inside me, whatever confusing thing is going on.
And does performing it help as well, or once it's there and once it's laid down, does it then get leached of meaning?
No. When I can perform it, that's the really therapeutic bit, because that's the connection bit. So the writing bit is how I figure out what I'm feeling, and when I'm performing it, that's when I figure out I'm not alone.
Oh, your therapist was right then. I mean,
yeah,
just
she was totally right.
Yeah,
she saved me a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, you literally make money from the music.
Exactly.
You get paid.
I get paid for my
get
therapy.
paid for your therapy.
It's amazing.
Fabulous.
Highly recommend.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's nothing like, I mean, this whole album is so full on and intense. And I've just played 40 shows where I play a lot of these songs to a live audience and I can hear audible sobbing.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it's such a common experience. I'm not going through anything original. But so many people, if they haven't gone through a divorce, they've grown up with divorced parents, or, you know, like so many people have firsthand experience of it. And just, you know, those themes of being a single parent or just trying to navigate your love life.
Totally.
In your 40s.
I mean, in hindsight, it was probably a good thing that you took a break in your 20s, because what often happens to people who get famous very quickly when they're young is they start writing about their concerns, which are all quite unrelatable, abstract concerns about like touring too much and, you know, being on planes too much and stuff like that.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, how many songs can I write about being on the road?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I'm on the road again.
You end up like, or, you know, you don't know what it's like to be famous and the real me is inside, and, you know, all the difficulty. You think that you're looking at a beautiful queen, but I'm actually vulnerable deep down, like blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas actually what you're going through now is mature. It's
That's
real.
relatable, yeah.
Yeah, it's relatable.
I think I I didn't like the idea that I was becoming that person too. I liked the idea of, I mean, I went to uni, I went traveling. I just became a nobody who said yes to everything for a few years, and it was so good. And I did get so much life experience.
And how do you? I mean, part of dating is sort of being a nobody as well. Like, how does Missy Higgins date in Australia?
It's very hard. I went on all the apps.
Yeah.
And
just as yourself, you didn't try to.
I went on
anonymize?
as Melissa.
Okay.
I tried the ARIA one, the celebrity one. It's a nightmare. It's all YouTubers and influencers.
Yeah.
Not my type of people. I tried the normal ones, and there's lots of lovely people there, but I realised quite quickly that I really am not a very superficial person when it comes to who I date. Like, it's so much about the personality for me. Like, anyone can become good looking. So it felt like a needle in a haystack. And I reckon good looking people are probably bad news. I feel like people that are too good looking have grown up knowing that, and they've developed a certain personality that's that I find quite repellent.
Right.
So I don't know. I like the interesting, weird ones, the ones that might not even be on a dating app. You know, the arty kind of, probably quite reclusive, kooky ones.
Yeah.
And yeah,
me too. I know exactly what you mean, and I mean, not to age ourselves, but like when we were young and I was on apps and things, it was much more about writing, and I would like text smarmy, snarky, like long text threads back and forth with people when I was in my 20s. And now I look at the kids these days with their apps, and it's all just pictures front and center.
Yeah,
and like there's not a lot of text.
Selfies
and selfies, yeah.
What do you call it? The things that they
with
put
a
over
cat filter on your face or something.
Yeah. With filters on.
With a dog ears on your head or something.
Yeah, with it, done on a certain angle that makes them look completely different to what they look like in real life.
Yeah, and it's funny because you're right that that does not lead to a huge amount of like sensitivity about exactly what the psyche of the person.
And I think you need shared experiences too. That's one thing that I've come to realise is I need to get to know someone really slowly while doing something side by side that we both can relate to each other about. I can't just sit over, over a table with someone at a restaurant and get to know them that way.
Right.
I just can't. I can't be myself.
Yeah. And do you like creatives, or do you tend not to?
Oh, yeah.
Shit where you eat?
No, they have to be creative. They don't have to be creative.
No, I mean, sorry, creatives as in that, like they're careerists in the creative arts.
Yeah, I have a lot more in common with creatives than I do anyone in a quote-unquote normal profession.
Yeah.
I think I would find it maybe a little bit hard to relate to someone with that lifestyle because I've never...
What lifestyle what in the thought bubble above your head when you talk about a normal profession? What is
9 to 5, wearing a suit, going to an office.
Right.
Yeah, or just like a doctor, anyone who just like clocks in and out of work.
What about a tradie?
Tradies are pretty hot. But they'd have to have a creative side to them.
Right.
Like they'd have to be very intelligent and very creative, like have...
I feel like I'm a matchmaker. I need to go off and find your creative tradie. I need to find your cute, reclusive, artistic tradie.
But also charismatic, reclusive but charismatic.
Reclusive, charismatic.
Quirky,
artistic.
Funny.
Nerdy, funny.
Not nerdy.
Tradie. Not nerdy?
No.
Oh, I like nerds.
Intelligent but not nerdy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. What's the difference?
I don't know. I feel like...
No glasses.
I'm just like thinking with the glasses and the nasally voice. I don't know. Yeah, maybe there's not. Well, I feel like nerdy, it's part of their identity, the fact that they're intelligent. But if someone's quietly intelligent, you just kind of discover it over time when you have deep late night conversations.
Yeah. You probably need to be not in Australia as well, like somewhere where you're not as famous.
Well, when I lived in America, it was a lot easier.
I'll bet.
To date,
yeah. How do you even overcome if you're sort of anonymous as you're starting to introduce yourself to someone on an app, at what point are you like, when they're like, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I'm a musician. They're like, oh, what sort of music? Because in their brains, they're like, oh, she's probably just gigging around, as in pubs or something. At what point do you drop the bomb of being like, actually, I'm Missy Higgins?
I never want to do that. That's the problem. Because I don't know if they're pretending to not know who I am, which has definitely happened.
Yeah.
Or if they really don't know who I am, in which case I'm not going to go, hey, by the way, I don't know if you've heard of me.
But you sort of do have to, because there are a lot of people who would not necessarily recognise your face instantly.
I would just
who
drop
know who
lots
Missy
and
Higgins
lots of
is.
hints, and then they'd eventually say, what's your stage name or whatever.
Right.
But it just feels like we're starting off on very different ground levels, you know? Like they can Google so much about me, and a lot of people know a lot about me already and come to the table with preconceived ideas, whereas I come to the table completely blind. And so I find it really hard to get over that barrier of, okay, well, what do you think you know about me? And do you like my music? In which case that could be kind of weird. But then I don't like the idea of you hating my music either.
I want you to be perfectly indifferent.
Yeah, I want you to just have never really heard it just by coincidence, and then suddenly start loving it when you meet me.
Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it? I was actually talking to my kids in the car this morning, driving them to school, about fame, because my son said that he wanted to be rich. No, I was talking about money, and we were talking about being rich. And then he said, I want to be rich because I love fame. And I said, actually, they're different things, you know. And I explained to him the difference between being famous and being rich. And he paused for a moment, and then he was like, I think I just want to be rich. And I was like, that's a good...
That's better.
That's better. Yeah. You're right. Because
that's the right one to choose.
Yeah, because being very famous is... weird. Like, it's good to be a bit famous. It's good to, like, you know, your name means
perks,
something
definitely.
when you're checking in at the airport, or you're you know, at a restaurant to get a table or something. But the idea of being so famous that you can't go out looking like a slob.
I know. I feel for Chapel Roan, how, you know, she recently released those videos saying, you know, would you go up to any lady on the street and ask for a photo with her? Would you ask for, you know, and follow her and her family around? Did you see those videos?
I didn't see it.
Oh, it's blown up across the world because everyone's giving her shit because they're saying, oh, you're newly famous and you know, you already can't handle it, because she's just the biggest thing in the world right now. But I feel for her because I only had, you know, a millimetre of the fame that she had, and it's just weird. It's unsettling, and it goes hand in hand with success when you're a musician. So you can't really resent it because you love the fact that your music is being loved by so many people. But the fact then that everybody you meet gets just a little bit of a weird, crazy look in their eye when they're talking to you is a strange side effect of success.
It's funny, isn't it? Do you remember noticing that for the first time?
I don't. And that's how long ago. I mean, it's, you know, 20 years ago that it started for me.
It's funny.
You know, I notice when I go to America, I notice how rude people are to me.
Right.
And it's only because people are so
For the
nice
first
to
time
me in
you're not
Australia.
famous.
Yeah, and I love it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this woman was
Give it
so
to
rude
me.
to me at the shop today. It was awesome. I had a genuine interaction with a human being today.
Yeah, it's like that. There's isn't there an episode of 30 Rock with John Hamm where, where Tina Fey suddenly realizes what it's like to be a beautiful person because he's so handsome that he thinks that everybody in the world is just always nice. And she has to explain to him that this is just only because you're beautiful that this is happening.
Yeah.
Regular people don't have people treating them this way. And it's the same with fame. So what does success then look like for the second half of your life? If like you're kind of just coming out of a state where you're reevaluating the white picket fence and the marriage and everything.
Yeah, I don't know. I think success for me at the moment is really being a good mum. That's my number one focus because I've been touring so much lately. I feel like I really want to just stay at home with my kids and focus on kind of them being okay and them feeling really stable. I want them to grow up feeling stable and loved and like they had a good, solid foundation of parenting.
Is it necessary to tour as much as you do financially?
No, not financially. I'm fine. I'm fine because of that first album.
Yeah.
If I was coming up today in the music industry, I'd be screwed because records don't sell. But luckily, 20 years ago, they used to. So I was able to buy a house and I'm fine. No, I mean, I love it. I absolutely love touring. Like it's always been my favourite part of the job. And this last tour, because it's been the anniversary of my first album, the 20th anniversary. So we've done the show in two halves. It's my new album, first half, my first album, second half. And it just feels like when I get off stage, I feel like it sounds so cheesy, but it feels like this is what I'm meant to do.
Yeah.
You know when you just feel like you're in the right place,
Totally.
doing what you were meant to do, and somehow somehow I was born with the ability to write songs that connect with people, and that feels so good, especially when they're songs that are about really, really hard moments in life that I feel like are stories people need to hear so that they can not feel so alone. So it feels like I'm actually doing something good in the world, which is a nice change because all through my 20s I felt like songwriting was so selfish and pointless. So I feel like I've finally come to a place now where I feel like I'm actually contributing something positive in the world. So I love it.
Why did you feel it was selfish and pointless?
I don't know. I guess I just felt like I didn't realise the impact that my music was making. I think looking back now and hearing so many stories 20 years later about the impact that my first album had on people and how they, it helped them get through a really difficult time in their life, or it was like, it was their companion soundtrack to a very special time, and they'll never forget it. Now I realise that album was important and music is important, but I think at the time it just felt like a pretty navel-gazy way to spend my days, writing about, dysfunctional relationships.
You're
and
not being a tradie. You're not building anything.
Yeah, exactly. There's
not doing anything.
Nothing tangible.
Yeah.
I'm not, feeding the poor.
Yeah.
I'm just singing about, my stupid adolescent broken heart.
It's so funny, isn't it? I remember my grandfather talking about, I would, when I started first getting success in writing and broadcasting, I would go over to New Zealand where he lived and tell him what I'm doing, and he would not understand how you could get paid good money for being an assistant writer on a television show. So he would listen to what I'm doing with my life and then just start talking about another grandson of his who was making money in the construction industry. Yeah, because there wasn't a building. And now there's a building.
Yeah.
So he gets money for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's good money. Whereas what am I doing? There's words on a page. Where does that even go? Someone says them and then it disappears into the ether. Radio waves go out. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
What is this?
Too confusing. Yeah, I was always really socially conscious from a young age too. So I was all about, saving the planet.
Right.
My dream when I was young was literally being the head of Greenpeace one day. And because I just thought that was just a noble way of making a living, or not making a living, but using your life. And so I think once I got into music and that kind of became my career accidentally, I just always had this thought in the back of my head that
I'm not on an anti-whaling vessel doing what I should be doing.
Yeah.
How do you feel about social justice these days?
I feel like I'm a bit torn because I know that I've been given a platform and I do feel the responsibility and the privilege to talk about things that I feel strongly about, but I also feel a bit of pressure sometimes to talk about things that I might not feel like I have a strong opinion on, or that I have anything legitimate to say. I mean, sometimes I just feel like the conversation is so loud and everyone's shouting at each other online. I'm like, why would I contribute to that for the sake of virtual signaling?
We don't all have to have an opinion about everything, but all the time.
But the vibe is that we do. You do if you're a person of.
No, totally. I remember getting a direct message from somebody who had a lot of followers on social media, which was like, if, and then a hand clap emoji, if you are not posting about Gaza every day, you are betraying. And I'm like, I mean, it's a terrible tragedy. What do you want me to say? How am I going to change anything by, I don't know, raising awareness about the most intractable geopolitical problem that has plagued the Middle East for a century. But the reason I ask about social justice specifically is because I feel like people of our generation are maybe grow up with a slightly more egalitarian and universalist idea about social justice that has now been replaced by what conservatives would call wokeness or cancel culture or something like that. That there's a slightly kind of finger waggy tone to to virtuous causes at the moment that rubs me the wrong way slightly, and that rubs up, against a more tranquil and kind of generous spirit of social justice that I grew up with.
Yeah, well, there's that whole saying about tending to your own garden before you I don't know what the saying is. Something about
make your own bed.
I keep starting these sayings and not really knowing how they end. Something about looking after your own garden before
get your own house in
start
order,
digging
maybe,
in anyone
before...
else's. Yeah, something
sure.
like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like for me, if I feel like I have something to contribute to the conversation that is that might make a tangible difference, I'll say it. But if I feel pressured to shout because everyone else is shouting and I'm going to get shouted at if I don't shout too, then I'm going to pull back and not get involved because I don't want to be bullied into saying anything.
Good. Yeah.
But yeah, I just for me it just feels I'm a little bit scared of. Like I never go on Twitter or whatever the hell it's called now because I went off that a long time ago because it just gets nasty so quickly. And the only thing that I'm really on is Instagram. And I feel like everyone that follows me there. You know, when you go on other social media platforms, you get a lot of people that can see your comments that aren't actually following you.
Yeah, they're not your people.
Yeah, so you get trolled really easily. But I feel like everybody that follows me on Instagram seems to be super lovely. And
what about the press? Because, I mean, when you do interviews like this, and, I'm sure that, we don't on this show try to grab something out of context and then shove it out onto social media to try to get the most salacious clickbait. But that would not be an uncommon practice for other shows to do. And like, do you have to have a little version of yourself standing on your shoulder whispering in your ear going, don't talk about this or don't talk about that because, I don't know, the Daily Mail might write a headline about it?
I think so. I'm definitely nowhere near as sensitive as I used to be because I think over the years I've learnt that, I don't know, if it's almost like the more honest you are, I get a little bit of a high from being super ultra honest with people that I've just met. And so I tend to be really, really honest in interviews right now. And I think maybe I'm making up for lost time because I was so guarded throughout my 20s, throughout those early years. But I feel like, I don't necessarily trust certain media outlets, but I think most of the time journalists are they're not out to get you because they want you to return to their newspaper or their outlet to have another interview in the future.
But often it's the parasitic outlets which are using something that you've said to another outlet,
like the Daily Mail.
Yeah, exactly.
I just don't pay any attention.
Yeah, I mean that's the other. That's what I do. I mean the simple answer is just don't read them and they go away.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'd never read anything about myself.
Right, really?
Yeah, no way.
Yeah.
Because if I go searching for lovely, flattering things, I'm going to find a lot of other stuff that I'll remember for a lot longer than I'll remember the good stuff.
It's true, isn't it? Yeah, and you can read 9 positive things and 1 bad thing, and the 1 bad thing sticks with you more than the 9 positive things do. You said before that when you come off stage, you feel like, that's what you're meant to be doing. Is it when you come off stage or also when you're on stage? Like, I'm interested where your head is when you're in those like moments of flow and connectedness.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in a state of flow when I'm on stage. Not always. I mean, you have good gigs and bad gigs, but the good ones are when you completely lose track of time and you feel like everything you say to the audience just connects and you're in this big like love soup together. And it's that feeling of ultra connectedness, like I'm not alone in this world, and all of my deepest, ugliest feelings that I'm singing to these people are being received with love and acceptance, and I feel like they can all relate to what I'm going through. And I don't know, we don't have many opportunities for that kind of thing in our life. Like that's like maybe church, but I don't go to church. So that sense of communion of like it makes me feel unlike anything else in my life when I'm on stage. It makes me feel connected to all human beings in a way that I can't doing anything else.
It's lovely, isn't it? And the beautiful thing about a musical event is that it's a church that everyone's chosen. Everyone there is there because they love your music.
Yeah.
You know?
They haven't been guilted into it.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
They weren't forced into it because, that's the religion, because they come from a long line of Missy Higgins fans.
Yeah, exactly. They've been indoctrinated into the Higgins church.
All right, let's close this out with perhaps a question as facile as the inspiration one, which is like, if you could say anything to your younger, like let's suppose go back to just before you broke big, like when you're in your teens, what wisdom would you impart to that creature?
It would be something along the lines of trust yourself and don't listen to the douchebags that are jealous of your career. And in saying that, I'm thinking about particular boyfriends that I had at the time that were budding musicians that were so bitter about my success that they were complete assholes to me about mine. So, yeah, I'd be quite specific about what people to avoid. But also, yeah, trust your instinct and know that your music will connect with people and that you're okay. All of your ugly, weird, uncertain feelings are okay. You'll figure it out at some point. Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm pretty happy with where I've ended up. I feel pretty like I've moved through a lot in the past couple of years, and I feel pretty excited about the next chapter, whatever that might bring. I love my kids. They're bloody awesome, and whether I meet someone or not, it doesn't really matter to me at this point, which is exactly where I wanted to get to. I wanted to get to the point where I felt like I didn't need anybody else. And
it's the best place to be in to meet someone as well.
It is, but I'm trying not to think of it in that way.
No, we're not going to be instrumental about it.
No.
Totally, it's an asset in its own right, but it is a sort of a prerequisite to
and just
being open.
The importance of friends too. I think that's something I've learned as I've gotten older. Like my group of girlfriends are just they're everything to me now. I didn't really have a close group of girlfriends throughout my 20s because I was away so much and touring the world so constantly. Now I feel like they're the ones that are going to stick around, not necessarily any fleeting romance that I have. It's going to be the girlfriends that I'm still cherishing when we're old ladies at 85.
We will cure you of that cynicism towards fleeting romance. I still believe it's possible. Thank you, Missy Higgins.
Thanks, Josh.